Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode from DGMZ. For all the viewers who are returning, welcome back. And for the new viewers accessing the podcast for the first time, I'm very glad to have you here. For the new viewers, I would highly recommend that you access the introduction episode that is part of the DGMZ playlist because that would be very insightful for you before you access any additional episodes. Just a recommendation, totally up to you. And also a gentle reminder that always have a look in the description box. Many a times I post additional hyperlinks there which are connected to either the songs I have used during the impression, stories I have used during the impression, or any other additional information. So always a good place to look for some additional supporting information on the episode. So today's episode is going to get into the third ghazal from Diwan-e-Ghalib. This third ghazal has 6 verses, 6 शेर हैं. So as always, we are going to go through the ghazal once. We'll read through it, and then we will get into the impressions verse by verse. So here is how it goes. मतलब अर्ज किया है, जुज कैस और कोई ना आया बरुए कार, सहरा मगर ba-tangi-e-chashm-e-hasud था, आसुftagi ने नaqsh-e-suvaida किया durust, zaahir हुआ कि दागh का sarmayaa दूध था ख्वाब में खयाल को तुझसे मुआमलaa, जब aankh खुल गई न ziyaa था न सूद था, लेता हूँ maktab-e-gham-e-dil में सबक हनोज, लेकिन यही की रफ्त गया और बूद था, ढापा कफन ने daagh-e-ayub-e-barahnagi, मैं वरना हर लिबास में नंगा-ए-wajood था. मक्ता अर्ज किया है, तैशे बगैर मर न सका कोकन असद, sargashta-e-khumaar-e-rusum-o-quyud था. So it's a beautiful ghazal, and while I was researching for it, trying to understand it, of course the first शेर or the first verse जो मतला है वो तो undoubtedly it is embedded it is embedded in the story of Laila Majnun. But overall ghazal की जो underlying theme है, that also has a lot of flavor and color and similarities with the theme of the Laila Majnun immortal love story. So we need to know the story first. We need to know the Laila Majnun story first. Now this is not a small story that can be covered in an episode. So what we are going to do is we are going to get into a very brief summary of it, or not so brief, but if an opportunity arises, there is definitely room for dedicated episodes on this story alone. But for now, let's cover it enough to be able to enjoy this ghazal. So Laila Majnun की कहानी या लैला मजनू की कहानी का समरी इस शेर से बेहतरीन तरीके से शुरू किया जा सकता है. सो ये इंशा का शेर है. लैला और मजनू की लाखों गर्चिए तस्वीरें खिंची, मिल गई सब खाक में जिस वक़्त जंजीरें खिंची. So basically, no matter how famous Laila Majnun got afterwards, posthumously, or even when they were alive, no matter how much they were written about, how much they were painted, how much they were talked about, no matter how much poetry was written around them, much of it by Majnun himself, it all turned to dust the moment they were split apart. So the reality of life destroyed. The reality of life destroyed or ended the big phenomena of Laila and Majnun. The reality of life cut it short. So let's go through the story quickly. So Majnun's real name was actually Qais. Majnun was a name given to him, and we will get into the reasoning behind it. But yeah, his original name was Qais. So this is how the story goes. Qais ibn ul-Mulawa was a boy, just a boy, when he fell in love with Laila al-Amariya. And from the very first day he saw Laila, he knew that she was meant to be his beloved. It is said that they were in love even before they knew what love was. So they met in the school for the first time. And with every passing day, Majnun got more and more in love with Laila, more and more obsessed with Laila. And as his education grew, so did his mastery over art and literature. And that is when he started writing poems about Laila, poems about his love for Laila. And he would read them aloud on street corners to anybody who would care to listen. And this passionate display of love and devotion publicly, that is what earned him the title of Majnun. Majnun is a word, when split, it means junu. Junu coming from the word jinn. Jinn translates into spirit, demon. So possessed by a demon, possessed by a spirit, a madman, a possessed man, a crazy man. That is the name Majnun earned because of his almost frenzied, almost on the verge of crazy kind of obsession with Laila and the public display of it. And it is always said that his existence was all Laila centric. So he was not only called Majnun, he was called Laila's Majnun, Laila Majnun. So the object of his obsession, the object of his craze, the object of his intoxicating love was Laila. Now, as this love became more and more public, thanks to Majnun's public vocalization of it through his poetry and otherwise through his actions, the two families, especially Laila's family, got very worried about what the people will say, the gossip, the talk about both of them. It had already started making its rounds. So they split the couple. They split the couple, and that is where the entire mayhem begins, right? This separation of the lovers by their family, especially by Laila's family, is where the madness begins, right? So it is said that Majnu or Majnu's father actually found the courage to ask Laila for her hand, Laila's father for her hand in marriage. But ironically, Laila's father rejected the proposal of marriage on the grounds of Majnu being a madman, Majnu being crazy, Majnu being obsessed, Majnu being mentally sick. And that is the paradox, that is the irony of it, because everybody knew, including Laila's father, that the reason for Majnu's madness or obsession was Laila. It was no outwardly demonic spirit or anything like it. It was Laila. But that was the reason which Laila's father used to reject the marriage proposal. And after that, Laila's father went ahead and promised Laila's hand to somebody else in marriage. This is when Majnu was overcome with grief, and he abandoned his home and family and disappeared into the wilderness. Wilderness here is the desert, and that is where the sher, right, the first sher is picking from. So Majnu started living a life of solitude among the wild animals, and he used to spend his days composing poems for his beloved Laila. Meanwhile, Laila was forced to marry somebody else. The news of her marriage devastated Majnu even further, and he continued to live his life of solitude in the desert and refused to return home. Many a times, I think 2 times or 3 times, his father made the journey to come and bring him back home. A few times his friends did the same, but he refused. He refused to come back to the city. Now Majnu's mother and father, they missed their son terribly. Majnu was a precious child who was born to them after a long period of prayer and penance. And they every day used to wait for him, long for him to return. It is said that they would leave food at the at the bottom of their garden, hoping that he would come back to them out of the desert. But Majnu did not come back. He remained in the wilderness and wrote his poetry in solitude. It is said that he did not speak to a single soul. He spent his time in the desert surrounded by the animals of the wilderness, and they gathered around him to protect him during the long desert nights. There are many stories that initially when Majnu entered the desert, 3 or 4 instances where he saw an animal either captured by a hunter or in some pain, in a trap, and he released them, or bartered his own belongings with the hunter on the condition that he would set the animals free. So I guess that is where that dynamic developed. Many times when the travelers would pass the desert, they would see him wandering in the desert and reciting his poetry to himself, writing in the sand with a stick, and all of them concluded that he was a picture of a broken-hearted man driven to madness. Many years later, his parents passed away, and Laila came to know about that, and she knew how much he loved his parents, and that's why she was very determined to send a word to him about their death. And finally she found an old man who said that he had seen Majnu in the desert and agreed to give Laila's message to Majnun. And hence Laila sent that message, and once Majnun received that message, he was overcome with this sense of huge loss and pain. It is said that he cut himself even more from the world and promised that he will live in the desert till the day he dies. Now, years later, Laila's husband died, and finally Laila was in a position where she could hope that she was free to be with Majnun in the worldly sense, right? But there also Kismat didn't work in their favor. She came to know about a tradition where she would have to be in 2 years of mourning after her husband's death before she could see a single soul. And that is when she decided that it was too much to bear anymore. After so many years of being away from Majnun, if she had to be away from him 2 years more, and 2 years that will be spent in solitude, she realized this was more than she could bear. And she gave up her life. And it is said that she died of a broken heart, all alone in her home, having never seen Majnun again. Now the news of Laila's death reached Majnun in the desert, and he immediately traveled to the place where she was buried. It is said that he cried at her grave, kept crying till he gave up his life. And here are the last verses, and they are very famous. Everybody quotes them. Here are the last verses he wrote at the graveside of his true love. I pass by these walls, the walls of Laila, and kiss this wall and that wall. It's not love of the houses that has taken my heart, but of the one who dwells in those houses. So it's a tragic love story, but we had to get into it briefly to understand the relationship of Majnun or Qais, which was his original name, to the desert. So Majnun and Laila's interaction was very short-lived in the 3D world. In the real world, their interaction and the period when they were together was very short-lived. The time for being separate came very soon, and then it never got over till the day they died. So the entirety of their life pretty much was spent being apart from each other. And in Majnun's case, this period of being apart from Laila, most of it was spent in the desert. It seems that in the beginning, it was the people and it was the town and the family and the tribes, both at his end and Laila's end, who were renouncing him and his love for Laila, right? Who were rejecting him and his love for Laila. But there came a time when it was Majnun who turned around and rejected everyone. He rejected the world, he rejected his family, he rejected Laila's family, the traditions, everything. He rejected everything, he renounced everything, and decided to leave it all behind and go and create his own world in the desert. because that was how he wanted to live. He wanted his days to be wholly, solely spent on Laila and Laila alone. Writing poetry about Laila, thinking about Laila, imagining about Laila, missing Laila, grieving Laila. He did not want anything else. And when he reached the desert, though the desert did not give him the worldly comforts of food and shade and house and all that, it did give him what he needed: isolation, protection from the world, and a place where he could fully indulge in his love for Laila, or he could fully indulge in the grief and pain caused by the love of Laila. So with that background, let's get into the first verse. जुज कैस और कोई ना आया बरूए कार, सहरा मगर ba-tangi-e-chashm-e-hasud था. जुज कैस, कैस के सिवा, other than कैस, कोई ना आया बरूए कार to the level of that achievement. So except Qais or Majnun, nobody has come to that level. Nobody has come to that level of intensity and passion and madness in love. Sahra magar ba-tangi-e-chashm-e-hasud tha. But also, Sahra, the desert itself was ba-tangi-e-chashm-e-hasud. The desert itself was narrow like an evil eye, constricted like an evil eye, stingy and narrow like an evil eye. And when I was chashme-hasud, chashme is eye, hasud is envy, jealousy, tangi is narrowness of an evil eye. And I was getting into the details of chashme-hasud and realized that eye, of course, eye has a special superstitious meaning in English. We call it evil eye. But the concept of evil eye dates back 1,000 years. It is found in lot of cultures. And in Persian language, there are many terms. So one is chashme-hasud, which Ghalib has used here. One is chashme-bad, bad as in badru, as in bad. So a bad eye. One is chashm-zakhm, an eye which can cause injury. And then the last one is chashme-mohra. So all of these are concepts of evil eye, where it is believed that a malevolent, envious glare towards an unsuspecting person can bring that person bad luck or a curse. Evil eye is a supernatural belief that exists in various forms across many different cultures and religions, from the Mediterranean and the Balkans, across Turkey to Iran and Central Asia. And it is said that to protect oneself from evil eye, you can use an amulet, which is called nazar. And in Persian, these kind of amulets are referred to as nazar kurbani or chashme nazar. And there is a phrase you use to ward off evil eye, which is called chashme badur. So chashme bad is a bad eye, dur is far away. So far be the evil eye, right? So the fact that Ghalib has used it here is very interesting because it almost seems that he is using evil eye in two contexts. Number one, the desert has become narrow and stringent like an evil eye. So basically the desert also did not want to entertain or allow entry to another lover in addition to Qais. The desert was owned by Qais. And the way, if you get into the story of Laila Majnun, you will realize that Qais really won over the desert. The animals in it, the plants in it, the weather, the days, the nights. He was so much in sync. Those people just accepted him with open arms. He became a part of their ecosystem. So much so that if there was a traveler, human traveler who wanted to visit Qais, these animals would protect him. They would attack that traveler. Only if Qais asked them to calm down would they allow somebody to come close to him. And that is why that relationship that Qais had with the desert, Ghalib is trying to say, sure, you can say that there has been no lover better than Qais to rule the desert like he did because of his passion and madness, right, for Laila. But you also have to admit that the desert also has not been very open and accepting to any other lover than Qais. And by extension, Ghalib is saying there is another lover who matches and even surpasses Qais's passion. It is me. I, Ghalib, do have equal and more passion and craze than Qais does. But it is the desert who is not very accepting. Like a jealous evil eye, it has constricted itself, allowing only Qais to be there, restricting entry of any other lover, because the desert believes that nobody else deserves to rule them like Qais did. So very beautifully, on one hand, Ghalib is paying homage to Qais and his relationship with the desert, the way he ruled the desert, the way the desert accepted and declared the fact that there was no other lover that could match Qais's innocence, purity, craze, passion, obsession. But on the other hand, Ghalib is also saying, had the desert being a little more generous and open, there were other lovers who could have matched Qais's zeal. Very interesting. Moving on to the next verse. आसुftagi ने naqsh-e-suvaida किया durust, zaahir हुआ कि दागh का sarmayaa duud था. Ashuftagi here means mental chaos, commotion, confusion, and then the degree keeps increasing. Mental turmoil, and then finally mental imbalance, mental imbalance, and then finally madness, lunacy, right? So aashuftagi aashuftagi here means almost at the brink of lunacy. आशुफ्तगी ने नक्श-ए-सुवाida किया दुरुस्त. नक्श-ए-सुवाida दिल पे लगा काला दाग. दुरुस्त, mend it, erase it. जाहिर हुआ कि दाग का सरमाया दूध था. It dawned on me that this daagh was a mere smudge of smoke. So what Ghalib is actually trying to say is that the lunacy, the so-called madness, the so-called letting go of mental faculties liberated me. It liberated me because till the time I was trying to mentally rationalize everything, mentally find a logic in everything, have expectations from this love, have this love follow a certain path, right? It was painful. It was very painful. Because love, by definition, is something that charts its own course. You cannot templatize it. You cannot say, okay, love, please meet my timelines of finances, of whatever, right? Location, travel, age, religion, caste, creed. I mean, you cannot templatize it. It will form its own formula. It will chart its own course. So when you mentally try to put box in love in a specific formula which follows preset expectations, preset timelines, preset objectives, it's a very painful exercise because it's not going to work. It is going to backfire. You will come back again and again very disillusioned, very disenchanted. And that scars your heart. But once you let go of all this mental gymnastics you want to do with the formula, and you just let it flow the way it is supposed to flow, you set yourself free. You realize that this is a self-accelerated thing. It is not going to stop. It has its own power. It will run on its own. It does not need me. It does not need any formula. It does not need any template. I have to start it and let it go. It will continue to run on its own. It has a power generating machine of its own. No dependency. So Ghalib is saying that once I got to the brink of lunacy, and by extension it means once I let go of trying to tether love and my thoughts and everything to some kind of, preset expectation, I realized that a lot of pain in my heart healed. A lot of pain in my heart healed. It dawned on me that these heavy scabs and scars on my heart were mere smudges of smoke. When I lose control of my faculties, when I let it go, the pain becomes easy to bear. It starts healing. When I possessively hold back and try to think it through, or try to analyze it, or try to assess it, or try to find a logic and rationale in it, it hurts. It hurts. But when I let it go, it heals. The metaphorical meaning of this is that you have to realize that you have to let go of control. You have to let go of control on certain things like love. You have to let them flow. They will chart their own course. When you try to control them, when you try to overanalyze them, it always backfires. It's a painful exercise. Let's get into the next verse. था ख्वाब में खयाल को तुझ से मुआमला, जब आंख खुल गई न जिया था न सूद था. So tha khwab mein khayal ko tujh se muaamlaa. So here Ghalib is again talking about the interactions he has with his beloved in his imagination, in his dreams, in the 5D. Right? So Ghalib is saying, in my imagination, in my dreams, we both are super. We both are super. We are indulging in the transaction of love full on, right? There is giving of love, there is taking of love, no restrictions, no hindrance, no roadblocks. The business of love is flowing effortlessly, smoothly, flourishing. So in my mind, this is seamless. In my mind, you and me are perfect. We are matched, we fit like puzzle pieces coming together. It is a perfect love story. It's a perfect transaction of love. No flaw. And when I open my eyes, I realize na ziyaa tha na suud tha, no profit, no loss. The transaction never happened. When I open my eyes, no profit, no loss. The transaction never happened. It's not on the books. It never existed on the books. So basically, again, in my introductory episode, I had mentioned one of the qualities of Ghalib's writing which really enchant me, mesmerize me. And this is that. Where on one hand, he is the eternal optimist. Flawless, beautiful transaction in the mind and imagination. And then, on the other hand, he describes the utter loss, dejection, disillusionment of nothing happening at all. From something so perfect in transaction, you swing to the other end where nothing happened. The transaction never even happened. Good, bad, loss, gain, forget that. The transaction itself never happened. So all that could be becomes all that could be but didn't. And if you think of it a little more philosophically, or a little more from the overall bigger picture, you realize when he says jab aankh khul gayi, when I awoke, right? When I woke up. Now woke up by extension means getting enlightened and illuminated also. So there is the physical act of waking up, but then there is a metaphorical act of waking up, wherein you are enlightened, you are illuminated. And he says and from that perspective, if you think, it almost seems that he's saying, when I woke up, I realized there is no profit, there is no loss. And this is where to my mind comes this thing that I read, which said, and I might not be quoting this to the word correctly, but the essence of it was, when the great scorer comes, he will not see whether you won or lost. He will judge you on how you played the game. How you played the game. So it almost seems that Ghalib is, if metaphorically you try to capture it, it seems that Ghalib is saying that there is no victory and loss in the game of love. You don't win love or lose love. It is not a transaction. It is not about profit and loss. The ultimate thing is how you loved. That's all you should be worried about. That's all you should use as a benchmark to assess your love. Don't assess it by wins and failures. Don't assess it by profit and loss. It is not a transaction. Moving on to the next शेर. लेता हूँ maktab-e-gham-e-dil में सबक हनोज, लेकिन यही की रफ्त गया और बूद था. बहुत ही प्यारा शेर है. लेता हूँ maktab-e-gham-e-dil, maktab school, gham-e-dil school of the broken hearted. School of the broken hearted. Sabak lesson, hanoz every day, even now, every day, regularly, still. So Ghalib is saying, in this world which is a school of heartache, कितनी गहरी बात है कि ये जो दुनिया है ये एक स्कूल है for heartache. This world is but a school for heartache. Basically he's trying to say world is full of pain and grief. And every day you wake up in this world, you wake up to learn a new lesson in pain and grief, in broken hearts. So Ghalib is saying, I am but a pupil in this school of pain and grief, the school of the broken-hearted. And I have been attending this school for a while now. So every day is a new lesson. And I've been learning these lessons for a while now. And here is the summary of what I've learned so far. रफ्त गया और बूद था. रफ्त गया, gone, और बूद था, was. And this is where you realize the caliber. This is where you realize the caliber. So, how does one capture the day in, day out lessons in pain and grief one has learned over their lifetime? In 2 words. Just 2 words. Gone and was. Gone, was. So basically Ghalib, it seems, is trying to say that what I have learned from this pain and grief by attending this school of broken hearts every day is that there are only 2 things that exist: gone and was. By extension, everything that brings you joy, everything that brings you happiness, everything that can bring you love is either gone or was. It's in the past tense. By extension, things that bring you joy and happiness are so fleeting that they come in the present but for a moment sometimes. And they are so short-lived in the present, they become a part of your past so quickly. All you can do is look back on good things. Whatever was to be has been. It does not exist in the present, and of course you don't see it in the future. So when you are broken-hearted, when you are taking lessons in pain and grief, this is the summary. 2 words, was and gone. Everything is over. It is in the past. You can reflect on it. Now that reflection can bring you joy. But everything you desired, everything you wanted is in the past. It has come to pass. If it was ever there in the present, it's not there anymore. That is what he has learnt in this school. Everything is gone and everything was. Beautiful. Moving on to the next verse. ढापा कफन ने दागh-e-ayub-e-barahnagi, मैं वरना हर लिबास में नंगा-ए-wajood था. ढापा कफन ने, कफन is the white cloth that is put on the corpse. So Ghalib is saying, finally the white cloth has covered dagh-e-ayub-e-barahnagi, the scars of the naked vices, sins, imperfections of me. So finally the naked scars of my sins and indiscretions and vices are finally covered once and for all. For the first time, finally they are covered. When I am lying dead and they have put this kafan over me, the white cloth over me. Otherwise, in the second line, मैं वरना, otherwise I, हर लिबास में नंगा-ए-wajood था. I, throughout my living days, was always naked in terms of my sins and vices and indiscreet activities, right? So no matter what I wore, no matter how heavy my cloak was, no matter how thick my garments were, they could never hide my vices, they could never hide my sins, they could never hide my follies, they could never hide my true naked self, right? So in my living days I could not achieve this, I could not camouflage it. But now that I am dead, finally there has been a cloth put over me which actually is successful in cloaking all that was bad about me, bad and naked, bad and visible about me. Now this share is very conflicting to me, because knowing what I know of Ghalib, I do not think that he believed that he was a man of sins alone. He did know that there were things that he should not have done, right? They were straight out vices that he indulged in. Gambling, drinking, all these things. But then he also knew that there were things he did which were perceived as vices by the people around him, but were not. Things like being progressive, things like being vocal, things like questioning, right? Questioning the powers to be. So I do think that here Ghalib is, in one way, of course, when you literally translate the verse, yes, he's saying that throughout my life I tried to hide, I tried to camouflage my vices, my sins, my, whatever I thought was not correct. I tried to hide it. When I was living, I was not successful. But now that I have died, finally these people are distracted enough from my vices, because they are right now focusing on the fact that I am dead. So they are their bandwidth is occupied with that, and hence they are no longer looking at me and trying to focus on my inadequacies. So finally I'm in a place where everybody is focusing on my death. This cloth over my corpse is hiding effectively all my vices. And in parallel, I think Ghalib in the second line is not apologizing. In fact, he is claiming the fact that till I was alive, I made no stories, I made no tricks or traps to fool people into thinking of me as something that I wasn't. Even when I knew that what I'm going to say and do is going to contradict their set expectations, I always did it openly. I was very naked, very transparent, very true, very on the surface with all my deeds and all my actions and all my words. And by words, his poetry. So I think in the second line he does try to say that while I was living, these things were never hidden. I might have tried at times to hide them, but otherwise, for many things which the world thought as vices, I thought as passion, correct, right. I believed in them, I was passionate about them, and I indulged in them very openly, and everything was on the surface for everybody to see. Now that I am dead and I am not there to stand behind my acts and deeds and words, yes, today people can put a cloak on it, put a cloth on it, bury it, and for the first time, everything is under a cover after my death. It wasn't so when I was alive. So you can take it both ways. Last शेर. तैशे बगैर मर न सका कोहकन असद, sargashta-e-khumaar-e-rusum-o-quyud था. Ye शेर, in my humble opinion, is very powerful. Of course, it has a story. Kohkan is by translation mason, and the famous mason in the world of love is Farhad. So Farhad ki kahani I have covered in detail in the episode that gets into Ghazal 1. So if you want to access that, you can. But briefly put, Farhad was a mason who was in love with Shiri, and as part of a task to get Shiri, he had to cut through a mountain. And it is said that while he was doing this Herculean, almost impossible task to cut through a mountain, he was tricked by someone who told him that Shiri was dead, just so that he could not complete the task. He would get distracted, not complete the task, and hence not get Shiri. And yes, as expected, as soon as Farhad was told that Shiri is dead, he took his own axe and split his head into two and died then and there. So Ghalib here is putting a very interesting question mark on this act of Farhad. So Taishe Bagair Mar na Saka Kokan. He's saying, it seems that Farhad could not die without the help of his axe. Taishe Bagair Mar na Saka Kokan. Ghalib is almost asking, why could he not take his life without the help of his axe? After all, when you are in love, the love for your beloved is the biggest reason to live and probably the biggest reason to die. Why would you need help of something else to live or die when you are so much in love? Love should give you the reason for both, the power to do both. So Ghalib is almost questioning Farhad's intensity of love, the ability of Farhad's love for Shireen to give him the drive and power to do big things like live and die. And then in the second line he says, sargashta. Sargashta means maddened, crazed. Khwab-e-rusum-o-quyud. Rusum-o-quyud is convention, tradition, right? So he's saying that it seems that Farhad was maddened by the intoxication of traditions and restrictions. And that is why he needed his axe to kill himself. Now, I spent a lot of time on this verse, and this is what I understood of it. So here Ghalib is trying to address two things. Number one, when you love someone, when you truly love someone, that love itself is power enough to do anything. It can give you the reason to live. It can give you the reason to die. And of course, you should live. In no way are we propagating death in love. But what I'm trying to say is, it is reason enough to do anything. Live, die, and whatever lies in between. Love should give you that reason. But as a human being, we have a tendency of getting intoxicated by traditions, restrictions, conventions. So we are conditioned right from day one we take birth. The society around us, the culture around us, the rituals around us, the practices around us condition us to believe that this thing should be done in this way. And if you do not do it in this way, you are not doing it right. Now, some of these traditional ways of doing things are time tested. They have stood the test of time and they are actually meaningfully true. And you should actually do things this way. But some of these are not time tested. They are just handovers from one generation to another generation. And the only reason to do them is because somebody did it like this way 150 years back. So traditions have to be time tested again and again at regular intervals to ensure that they are still valid, that they still apply, right? But if you blindly just keep doing something because it is supposed to be this way, or it was done this way, or it has always been this way, that is a tricky one. That is a tricky one. So Ghalib is saying that we not always have obstacles put in our path for things like love by outer forces. Many a times these obstacles are put in the path by us because we are coming to the table with a pre-seasoned, fixed template of expectations. We are wanting love to run its course per our expectations, per our timelines, per our cultural, traditional, ritual blueprints. We forget that there are few things in world, in this life, that they are not meant to. They are not meant to follow predefined templates. Love is one of them. Truth is another one. These are machines that are born with their own engines. You can start them, but then they run their own course. They chart their own path. They will follow their own path. And they will disrupt all the preset notions, templates, blueprints, formulas in their way. They are not meant to follow a predefined path. They are meant to chart their own path. So Ghalib here very beautifully captures that I am not taking away. He's saying that no taking away from the intensity and passion of Farhad for Shireen. But he also seems enjoyed or partake in the intoxication of tradition, conventions, restrictions. We as humans feel very happy when we do something as it was supposed to be, as per the process, as per the template. We feel an extra sense of achievement. We are conditioned that way. We feel it is great to do something exactly the way the other person did it. 1 generation before us, 10 generations before us. We think being, what is that word? Being a traditionalist is a big achievement. Sure, in some cases probably it is, but not in all cases. Certainly not in love. As humans, we do get this extra kick to know that we did it, and we did it per the book. We did it per the template. So Ghalib is saying that Farhad, yes, he had love for Shireen, and it was intense and it was passionate and it was one of its kind. But in parallel, he also harbored and nursed a passion for being a traditionalist. So he had to actually wait. He had to wait for somebody to come and give him the information that Shireen is dead, and then take his axe and kill himself. So he had to wait for certain concrete things to be in place. For the want of a better word, it almost seems like he wanted to see proof. He wanted to see proof that this was the end. He wanted to see some confirmation. He waited for that confirmation, and then he had to use a actual tool, that tool was almost part of his body. He was a mason. Axe was almost what a pen is to an author, a stethoscope is to a doctor, a drill is to a dentist, right? So he was a man of habit, he was a man of tradition, convention. And yes, all this had to be put in place for him to take his life. He just could not, take his life in thin air. He needed all this to give him the reason to take his life. Though the fact remains that his life was meaningless once it was confirmed that he would not be with Shireen. it's a strange share, but this is what I get from it, that yeah, we do harbor this love that wants us to chart a new course, but in parallel, as human beings, we also harbor this love for tradition, for not changing the template, for sticking to the book, sticking to how it has been done, because that gives us a lot of, that's how we are conditioned. It gives us a huge sense of achievement to do something per the book. Anyway, that was the last share. So that brings us to the end of this ghazal. I hope you enjoyed the impressions. And like I said, the story of Laila Majnun deserves episodes of its own. And we will see what we can do about that. But for now, hopefully the brief story we covered in today's episode was enough for you to get the context to enjoy the impression of this ghazal. That's what I have for this episode. In the next episode, we'll get into ghazal 4, which starts with कहते हो ना देंगे हम दिल अगर पड़ा पाया, दिल कहाँ की गुम कीजिए हमने मुद्दा पाया. I look forward to sharing the impressions of this in the next episode. Till then, love and light, everybody. Thanks for watching.